Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Uh, Gave the latecomers an extra minute to get situated. Um, so today we're here to talk about creating new lists for the portal. So you've seen this information in bits and pieces in our knowledge base and through other presentations in the past. But really, what I want to do today is take you from the use case that you need a new list on one of your work item forms and actually getting that extended in the back end and in place on the portal so it's usable. Before we start, I'm Nick Velick. I'm a consultant here at Cireson. I've been with Cireson about a year now, just coming up on a year. Previously worked in higher education, doing some sysadmin work, and having a blast here at Cireson, helping folks with System Center and all these Cireson products. So on the agenda today, we're gonna go through basically four big key areas. First is going to be extending the incident model or class or work item, whatever you want to call it, to include a new list known internally or behind the scenes as an enumeration. We're going to add new values to that list and talk about some of the gotchas there, some of the best practices there. Then we're going to go and we're going to find that new list that we created using PowerShell. I love PowerShell, so I'll try to sneak it in wherever I can. So we'll use PowerShell, find the ID of that list we created as well as the name if we need to, and then we'll get that list on a custom portal form, so we can start using it. And then we'll have a little time at the end for question and answer. And as we're going here, if you have questions, feel free to type them in, and we'll get to them at the end here. So starting out, first bit of business is how to extend the incident model to include the new list. This is going to be very demo heavy, so we're just going to keep this slide here for a while. You all are going to have to go and actually do this stuff, and I think it's a lot more helpful to see it actually in place rather than just see slides. So popping over to my lab, where I have my Service Manager installation as well as my Cireson Portal. I also have the authoring tool installed here. The authoring tool is what we're going to use to extend we're going to work with the incident class today. So it's what we're going to use to extend the incident model to add a new list to it. There are other options to do this kind of stuff. The authoring tool is worth installing, is worth using. There's plenty of stuff you'll need to use this tool for throughout your Service Manager experience. If you're unfamiliar with this tool, I won't lie to you. It has many warts and it has many frustrating pieces to it, but those certainly can't be overcome, and just have to know what some of those gotchas are as you go, and it works just fine. It does what you need to do for most of your use cases. So popped open the authoring tool, and I'm going to go and create a new management pack. First and foremost, we're making a customization, so that customization has to be stored somewhere. It has to live somewhere. You can do that just clicking on the new up the top or create new management pack. Best practice, you need to save these management packs. Everything we work on today would need to be stored somewhere. We'll talk about why that's important down the line. For the sake of this demo, it's all going to go on my desktop. And in my lab, I have a naming convention. It's very important that you have a naming convention to help separate your custom stuff from the out-of-box stuff. But all of my management packs start with NJV, tend to just get higher level and drill down a bit. So I'm going to call this Incident Class Extension. For now, I'm just going to call it Demo. It should suffice. So create that management pack, and right now this is just an empty, plain old management pack. Nothing special to it, nothing really defined within. So first thing we want to do is we want to load the incident class, because that's what we're going to end up extending. So to do that, we can click over here on the right side. We can scroll up to all management packs, and then it's going to pull all the management packs into text, all the classes. that it detects. So things like activities you can see there, incidents, problems, changes, etc., down to config items and users, all sorts of different classes in Service Manager to choose from. Takes a moment to load, but once it loads, we can start typing. What is going on? One of the warts. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a bit. Okay. So I see my incident class here. You can also type the filter up there. And I want to right click on that class. And again, one of the funky things with the author tool is you have to right click twice. Don't ask me why. Then click View. And what that's going to do is it's going to pop open the incident class in our Management Pack Explorer just below the management pack we just created. So what we have here is a sealed management pack. So a sealed management pack is a management pack that has had a key, a sealing key applied to it, and it kind of gets locked, and they do a great job of putting a lock icon on there to indicate that. When something is sealed, when a management pack is sealed, you can't make further changes to that sealed management pack. So right now what we want to do is we want to extend the incident management pack, and we can see all those default properties that are present there, all the actual cost, affected user, which is a relationship, alternate contact method. If we want to add something to this class, we can't add it right into the sealed management pack. It's going to actually get stored in our management pack we just created. So if I right click it and I click extend, that'll there's two options here actually I want to talk about quickly. So extend class, what you're going to want to use is extend class. It works. What extending the class essentially does is it takes the existing class and it adds something to that existing class. And that's exactly what we're trying to do here. We're trying to add a list value to our existing incident class. Inherit is another option you have, though not recommended really. It doesn't work as well. Extension works a lot better in the Cireson Portal, and there's lots of other kind of hills to overcome there. So inheriting the class takes the entire incident class and makes a lower level copy of it, like a child copy of it, and then you can add your extensions to that child and not have that be part of the actual incident class. And you see that in you see that throughout Service Manager. Things like the work item, a work item class has children in incidents, service requests, change requests, problem, etc. And so it is present in Service Manager, but for our purposes here, we want to extend. We're going to get a warning that says your customizations cannot be saved in a sealed management pack. We expect that, and it already has selected for us the management pack that we created when we first started. So now it takes the class part of our unsealed management pack, and it adds this extension of incident, class extension. So a class can be, in Service Manager, can be extended as many times as you want. However, a form cannot. So you could also use this Service Manager authoring tool to create custom forms for the console. There can only be one custom form for the console. So feel free to make one of those. It's not a pleasant experience, but plenty of tutorials out there on it. Luckily for the Cireson Portal, and what you'll see in the fourth part of the webinar today is that it's a lot easier of a process. It's a matter of just changing a couple lines of code, and there you go. So classes can be extended multiple times, and you'll see that what it tried to do when I created the class extension is it's calling the class extension of incident. So this class name here is unique, and we want to call it something different. So I'm going to call it demo webinar extension of incident, and I'll be consistent, put that in the description as well. So this bit up here, this class name is unique. So if you go and extend this class again, which is perfectly fine, extend the incident class again, and you just use the default both times, you're gonna get a warning or error the second time because the class named extension of incident already exists. So do call the class something unique for the purposes whatever you're extending it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new property. So we click create property. It's going to pop this up. It's going to say property 40. I don't want to call it that. I'm going to call it demo webinar 01, and I'm going to create it. So one of the little warts of the authoring tool is that it likes to play games with screen real estate. So I have my newly created property down here, and it's just at the bottom of every other property we have, so things like title are right there. You'll see it starts off by calling this new property a string, and that's something we're going to want to change. We're going to want to make it a list. So by bringing up this panel here at the bottom and scroll up, and I can see the data type is string. So I can click the little caret on the right side here, and I can see we have integer, double, decimal, string, date time, GUID, bool, list, rich text, and binary. So the option I want in this case is a list. Yet another wart is you'd expect that if you click that it'll select it. You kind of have to actually select off and then the select a list wizard will pop up. And so what it wants you to do, or what you could possibly do here, is select from an available list in Service Manager already, and a lot of these lists will look very familiar to you. But we don't want to select an existing list in this case. We are creating a new list for the portal, so we're going to hit create list, and we're going to call this demo list 01 internally, and display name we're going to also call demo list 01, and that is not actually going to be important because we can change the name of that label later in the portal on the fly dynamically. So we don't have to worry about what we're calling these properties behind the scenes. So we're going to go ahead and create the list, and it should select that list by default, and I'll hit OK. So now you're going to see that this new property we added is of the type list. It has an internal name of demo webinar, and we are in good shape here. So that is actually all we need to do in the just about all we have to do. So we want to first of all save it. Save our unsealed management pack. But the next thing we need to do, before we can actually use this in Service Manager, we have to seal it. And so we talked about that briefly earlier. We need to take this unsealed management pack and we need to apply a sealing key to it to lock it. Therefore, other classes can reference it. It can go nicely into the data warehouse. You absolutely 100% must seal your class extensions before importing them into Service Manager. Do not ever try to import a class extension in an unsealed management pack. You will have all sorts of problems doing so. So how do we seal it? So there's some tools out there like Fast Seal and etc. So feel free to Google any of those and play around with those. But I'm going to show you how to do it right in the authoring tool. So you can right click on your unsealed management pack, click Seal Management Pack, and then we're going to be asked for a few bits of info. So first off, the output directory. I'm just going to work entirely on the desktop today, but you do want to make sure that you're backing up these files and keeping a copy of them. The key file, I actually have a key file right on my desktop. I'm going to use you need a strong name key file, .snk file. Again, there are instructions on how to generate that. You can do so with Visual Studio. Pretty simple process, but you're going to want to create one of those for your own organization. Think of that as kind of, quite literally the key that locks the file. And then my company name is just going to be NJV, and then I'm going to go ahead and seal it. Seal succeeded, and I'm going to open up my desktop, and I'm going to see that I have a few things on my desktop. First of all, the key I just used. I have the XML file, which is our unsealed version of the management pack, and we have a .mp version, which is our sealed version of the management pack. So remember, we only want to import a sealed management pack. So to do so, we can go in the console, we can go to the management pack section, we can click import, and it's going to, by default, this is kind of a gotcha, so be careful with this. The MP files are defaulting to XML, so don't just click the first thing that looks right. We want to make sure we're clicking the MP file. So change the file type to MP, and we're going to import the MP. And you're also going to see that this is version 1.0.0.1, which I'll talk about in a second here, about how to actually update this. But good practice when you're importing class extensions, just management packs in general, is just to restart the Service Manager console. There are some bugs with some versions of Service Manager that don't let you actually save a form in the console if you haven't reopened the console since you imported the class extension. But we can see just in the console, I go and I open up an incident, and in the extensions tab we have our demo webinar class extension. So it's currently a list, which you can see with the little drop down versus a string value. It doesn't have any values. That'll be the next step. But we do have our class extended. Hooray! At least behind the scenes. Now let's talk real quick about best practice with these management packs. If you ever needed to update that management pack, let's say you wanted to add a second list, and it was for a very similar purpose. Maybe I'm doing another webinar, and I needed to add a second list to that management pack. In order to do so, like I said before, we can't edit this MP file. Once it's locked, it's locked. You cannot change it. So what we actually need to do in that situation is we need to open up our original XML file, the one that we applied the ceiling to as our last step. We need to open that XML file, make whatever changes in here we want, so maybe create some new properties, and then seal it again. And the authoring tool will automatically increment that version number for you, so it'll increment it from version 1.0.0.1 to 0.2. You can't ever import a version of a management pack lower than the current one in the console, so luckily it does that for you, and if you are trying to revert to an older version, you can't do that. So it's important to keep both your MP and your XML files stored somewhere safely. You're only going to import the MP, like I said, but you need to keep that XML if you ever want to extend or add to your MP file. Okay, so recapping that section, we extended the incident model, we used the authoring tool, we extended the class, we did not inherit. Lots of advantages to doing so from a portal usage perspective. And always seal your class extensions. You only want to import MP files, and you do want to keep all the files you work with, including your sealing key, throughout that process. So on to the next part is we want to add new values to this list. We have the list defined behind the scenes, great, but it's not a very useful list if it doesn't have any values in it. So how do we do that? So you've probably been here before for your out-of-box list, but if you go to Library in the Service Manager console, go to Lists, and we search for our new list called Demo List 01, and we double-click it. What's going to happen is it's empty right now, so we hit Add Item, and it's going to try to get us to save it in a management pack, and that makes sense because we imported a sealed management pack of which we can't edit. So even storing those values, the values have to live somewhere. So you want to store this in an organization-specific management pack. You certainly don't want to store it in any of the out-of-box management packs, and you want to store it somewhere that makes sense from a naming standpoint as well as a references standpoint. So you might have been here before, but you can click New. You could type the name of the management pack, and we have a new management pack created. We can add a couple items to that management pack. I'm going to call it list value 1, list value 2. We can save that, and you'll see now that the list does have values in it. If we went back to the incident form, we would see those values present. And there's no big problem doing that, and if you've done that before, it's okay. It's just a bit messier. So So if we take this management pack, and here's why creating it through the Service Manager console is kind of a no-no. If you export this management pack, and I'm going to export it right to the desktop, you'll see it actually comes out kind of in this gibberish. It starts with management pack dot, and then it has a bunch of numbers and letters at the end. We can edit this in Notepad++, and we can see, we can see the enum values we just created, our list values 1 and 2, and we can see the name of the management pack as we labeled it in the console. But when you export it, it has an internal name which is different, and the internal name, it has an internal ID and a file name that it uses when you export from the console. So especially if you're going from like a dev environment to QA or to production, and you're moving management packs around, it can become very difficult to tell which management pack is which when you're exporting and creating in the console and exporting in that way. So you've many alternatives. One such alternative is you can actually just create a new management pack right in here and call it demo list value, something better, something like that. We could create that management pack, and then we could just take this management pack right here as it is, should be here on my desktop. We could take that management pack and we could just import it right now, and it would, and if you took that management pack and you exported it, it would look perfectly fine. The other way you can do it is through PowerShell. So I can take this snippet here, and I will have these available after if you want any of this code. But we could take use a PowerShell commandlet, and let me just change the names here real quick. But we could take a PowerShell commandlet called new SCSM management pack, and we can specify a few parameters for it: the management pack name, a friendly name, and a display name. Those things all boil down to what it looks like in the console, what it looks like when you export it, and what it looks like internally, essentially. And then a version. So I can actually create that right through PowerShell. And I had to import a module there, which I'll talk about actually in the next step. But we go, and what did I call that? I forgot already. Sample. Okay, so I can see now in my management pack section that management pack, that unsealed management pack created through PowerShell, is actually right in the console already, as you would expect it. And if I export it, I can put it right on my desktop, and I can see that friendly name persists. So that can be useful for a few reasons, but number one, we want to make sure that when we export these and they're backed up on a file share somewhere, we actually know pretty easily what file is what. But you can also imagine, let's say you're starting a new environment and you need to create a bunch of different management packs. You can create a bunch of different management packs much faster through PowerShell than you could clicking through the GUI or clicking through the authoring tool. So keep that in mind. Now other best practices bits here, and the one I'm going to use today is actually I want to delete that management pack we just created. So I want to delete the bad management pack because we don't want to be saving in that. And if I go ahead and go back to library, and I look at my demo list, you'll see that those values are gone, and that is expected as we deleted the management pack, the unsealed management pack that stores those values. So let's go ahead and add items, and I'm going to go ahead and add them through the sample MP through PowerShell is perfectly fine. Stick to a naming convention that makes sense for your environment. When I create these values, one other thing I want to mention is when I create those values, I am creating a dependency. So if I go and I look at the management packs we just created. So I have my class extension, which has the list defined, and then I have my unsealed management pack we created a few minutes ago that has the actual list values defined. If I double click on the sealed extension now, you're going to see there's this dependencies section at the bottom, which shows you management packs that this management pack depends on, and management packs that depend on this management pack. So let's say we got into a situation where I no longer wanted this incident class extension, and I tried to delete it. It's going to yell at you and it's going to say, there are other management packs that depend on this management pack you're trying to delete. So in other words, you can't delete this management pack. You cannot remove it from your environment until you remove all of its dependencies. So I would have to first remove this management pack, the unsealed one, of which I'm storing the actual values, and then I could go ahead and I could delete the sealed version. So food for thought here is how do we break up management packs in our environments? And you want to try to do it to reduce the number of dependencies of that one management pack carries throughout your environment. So if this management pack, this unsealed management pack, this sample through PowerShell, stored only values for our extensions, then we keep that nicely. We keep references and dependencies to that management pack that management pack needs are kept within that one sealed version. If I were to say store all of my lists in one gigantic management pack, and then I decided we're escalating from dev to QA and prod, and we actually don't need this, so we don't want to move this management pack over, we couldn't import our unsealed management pack because it would be looking for our sealed management pack through a reference, and it doesn't exist. So it's good practice to break this stuff up. I typically break it up. You see, actually, in my lab, I have two categories, kind of built-in lists and custom lists. I tend to say any out-of-box value, any list value in an out-of-box management pack, I put in a built-in list management pack, broken up usually through work items, release record, problem, activity. And any customizations I do, any custom lists I create, I store those values in a separate management pack, and that just keeps our references nice and tight, so we don't get in a situation where we can't bring over a huge management pack because it's missing a reference that we don't want anymore. Okay, so recapping that section, create these new list values in the console library lists. You want to use an organization-specific unsealed management pack. You have to use an unsealed management pack because you can't edit in the console. You can't edit a sealed management pack at all. Break them down. So part B2 is break them down based on break them down based on type, typically to avoid dependencies or to keep those dependencies manageable. Last but not least is don't create those unsealed management packs in the console. If you have, it's fine, and you can also clean them up through XML. But it's just less of a headache if you just use the authoring tool or PowerShell to create those management packs. Also can help if you create everything you need up front. Your admins are much more likely to use those management packs if they exist, rather than just take the closest management pack they can find. All right, we have our new list extended. We have some values in that new list. Now what we want to do is we want to get it on the portal. And before we can actually do that, we need to find a couple bits of information in PowerShell. So there are a few other options other than PowerShell if you're not comfortable with PowerShell. We'll touch on those here in a moment, but PowerShell's great. It's not going away. It has a lot of uses beyond Service Manager, so it's well worth learning to make your life easier as your IT career goes on and on. So today we're gonna use a module called SMlets, and you see I already imported it for the new SCSM management pack command that we used earlier. So this module SMlets includes a bunch of includes a bunch of Service Manager commands. There are some out-of-box commands for Service Manager, and then some of those are great, but this just adds a whole kind of another group of them. You can go on, you can Google for SMlets, and it's all in Codeplex. You can download right from there, and there's lots of documentation about as far as what modules there are, and lots of examples out there as well using SMlets. It's pretty popular amongst the service manager community. But just to see a few of the things that it adds, you can do this git commandlet in PowerShell, and we can pass it a wildcard of SCSM, and that'll give us a bunch of different commandlets that have the word SCSM in them. And spoiler alert, all of the commands have SCSM in them. So you can see what a lot of these commands are, and you can do a help for any of these commands to see a little bit more info as far as usage go and what they're intended for. But they all follow PowerShell's convention. They use verb-noun kind of pairing, so get this thing, add this thing, remove this thing, set this thing. So this is just some of the stuff that's available to you if you want to get out of the blazingly fast console and onto something that works a little bit quicker. So what we're going to do here is we want to get, we first and foremost added a new property to the incident class. So we need to have that property name when we're adding it to the portal. So to do that, just going to kind of go through this, how you might think about it. So there's this SCSM class commandlet, which lets us get the incident class. That lets us get any class in Service Manager. You can pass it a name parameter, but you see there's other parameters you can use. And just if you're trying to find a particular class, you can start by using the name parameter and just type part of the word. I imagine the incident class has the word incident in it, right? So if I run that command, you're going to see I'm going to get a bunch of stuff. And so some of this stuff I don't actually want, but it all sure enough has the word incident in the name column, as we expect. So let's tone this down a bit. I know it's got to be something system.workitem.incident, because these other ones just don't really make sense. This isn't anything Cireson specific at the moment. We don't care about the workflows. We don't care about some of this stuff. So let's try a get SCSM class again and pass it the name parameter again, using tab completion to speed things along. And let's try something a little bit more specific. So when I do a get SCSM class system work item incident, now I have 5 results. So that's trimmed down a bit more, but I really only want this result. And so I'm seeing that all of these contain this string system.workitem.incident, and there's nothing else I can really filter on here, because these all seem to follow the same convention, just with something else at the end of it. So what we can do to get around that, we can actually throw what's called an anchor in the string there, in the search string. So system.workitem.incident and then a $sign at the end is going to say, grab me everything that contains system.workitem.incident and nothing afterwards. So I can do that, and you can see that it only returns that one object because there is nothing after the incident system.workitem.incident in this case, but everything else was excluded because it has something after it. You can also do an anchor in the front with a caret sign, or with this guy, I believe, that caret sign. So now I have that one class I want, and we're going to store it in a variable. So I hit up on the keyboard, and it brings the command I just typed back. And I can hit the home key to go to the very beginning of the line, and I can type a variable, and all variables in PowerShell start with a $sign. And so what I want to do is I want to store this in a variable called class. So now when I type that variable class, you'll see it returns that single class object that we want. So I have that class now stored in a variable that I can use, and I want to do another commandlet called get SCSM object. And one of the parameters I can pass that is actually the class parameter, and I can just use the class parameter, and I can pass it the class variable. And what that should do is it should return every single object of the incident class in my environment. Luckily, I've cleaned up recently, and this isn't in the hundreds and thousands. So I don't want all of my incidents. I only need one. I only want to take a look at one of these. So I'm going to hit up the keyboard to get that commandlet back, and I'm going to do what's called a pipe in PowerShell, and I'm going to pipe that to another commandlet. So what a pipe in PowerShell does is it takes the output from what's before the pipe and it uses it as input for the next section. So it's taking the output of this getSCSM object call and using it as input for the select object call. So select object just lets us take a specific object from this set, and what I'm going to do is pass it. It has a handy parameter called first, and you can select the first however many you want. So if I just do select object first one, that returns me just one result, IR 4061. So great, but I'm looking for property names, and it doesn't help me. I already know the class name, display name, last modified. Those don't help me. So by default, PowerShell is going to try to give you just the most common type of info you might want, you might be looking for as you search for the object. That's going to be different based on commandlet. The output of every commandlet's different, but there are other properties behind the scenes, and you can actually pipe this again. So take the output of that select object and pipe it to another commandlet that we're going to use called format list, and we're going to pass it the property parameter, which means I want to select certain properties, and I'm going to use an asterisk to say give me every single property you have. And if I do that, I get a big list of properties. So we can see in here, this is a bunch of stuff that hopefully looks familiar. We have stuff like description and title. So where is our property? Right there. So demo webinar 01. So that's the property name we want. So we're going to go ahead and tuck that aside. I'm just going to store it here for now. So that's part one of what we need to put this on the incident form. The other thing we need is the ID number of the list we created. Remember that this is just the property that we added to the incident class, and that property references a list, and that list has values. And we've gone through creating that property, adding values, creating that property, tying it to a list, and adding properties to that list. So we need the list. We need the list ID. So there is a handy command that we can use called getSCSM, as you guessed it, enumeration, which would let us grab that list. And we're going to again pass it the name param, and let's just search for demo first. So sure enough, our list has demo list 01 in the name. And it only returned us one result, which is fortunate. If you had a lot of different lists or different similar property names, you could certainly whittle it down the same way we just did. So I want to take that again, and I'm going to pipe it to a format list again. And if you get tired of typing out format list in all its glory with the property, kind of like that, you can use what's called an alias in PowerShell, just FL asterisk, and that'll do the same kind of result. So I see now that it's dumped out every single property of that list, and one of those properties is the ID. And that ID is what we're going to want for the next section here with the portal form. So I'm just going to tuck that away right there. Okay, so I think I have everything I need now. So recapping this section here. We need the list name and the ID to add this list value to the Cireson portal. If this was a property like a string or Boolean or something like that, you only need the name in that case. There is no list associated with it as well. Just FYI. I mentioned earlier there are other ways to find this information. The name of our property, we named it in XML, so we kind of know what it was anyway, but we could just look at the XML because that's where those property names are defined. We could also, if you're a SQL guru, you can find this info through there. There's also tools out there such as SCSM Entity Explorer. You can find that on TechNet. It kind of gives you a GUI kind of point and click way of finding that information as well. So all are acceptable. It really comes down to your preference, how you'd like to actually get that information. So the last step here is we have everything we need at this point, and we need to actually make this usable. So how are we actually going to get this list into the Cireson portal? So here is my Cireson portal. Working in the same VM here. And in order to get this value on this portal form, we need to make a custom form. So some of you might already have this, a custom form created. It's one of the most common things to be done really as far as customization goes. You know, moving fields around, adding fields, renaming fields, etc. So I'm going to go through how to do it from scratch here real quick. If you already have an existing form, then you can, obviously you've already done part of this, so you can skip it. But we want to go to the Cireson Portal directory. We want to go to the scripts folder. We want to go to the forms folder. And we want to go to the templates folder. And in the templates folder are a bunch of the different form templates that are used in the portal, most of which are customizable. And you can take this incident.js file and copy it to your custom space directory. So Cireson Portal, custom space, paste it in there, and now you have the incident. You have a custom form, an identical custom form in your custom space library. So we haven't done anything really yet, but we have changed something. We've changed a little bit of how the portal thinks. So how the portal works as far as custom forms go is it's first going to look in this custom space directory to see if there's a customized form in that directory. If it finds it, it's going to load that custom version of the form. If it doesn't find anything in the custom space directory, it's going to look to where we just were within scripts, forms, templates, and it's going to load the version that's there. Very important that you do make a copy of that file and put it into custom space. Custom space is preserved on Portal Upgrade. If you ever have a support issue and you're doing modifications outside of custom space, it can become very, very difficult to actually troubleshoot that. So you do want to, everything you do, make sure you do within the confines of this custom space folder. So we have a copy of our incident.js file. Some environments, by the way, you might need to go into properties, security, and the current user, make sure that they have permission to modify the file. That'll vary environment to environment. But once you have the file copied over, you can edit it with Notepad++ or some other editor is fine. Just don't use Notepad regular because it formats everything in a really, really difficult, frustrating way. So I definitely recommend using something like Notepad++. So on this incident.js, within this incident.js file, we have our custom form. And we can see that we have things like affected user, alternate contact method, title. And we see that that's the same information that's here. It's just kind of rendered top to bottom on the form, and it's rendered top to bottom right in this file. So we can actually change this stuff around on the fly. So let's say and one helpful thing to do is, the form's already there, and it's very easy to miss a comma. It's very easy to miss a bracket. So first and foremost, before you make any changes to an existing custom form, just make a quick backup of it. It'll save you hours of hunting for commas and brackets later. I'm just making a fresh copy here, so no harm, no foul. The other thing is that the formatting is already kind of done for you. That's just a bunch of name, value, pairs. So there's no sense in retyping all this out. That's why Control C, Control V exist. So I can just take this entire row and I can make a full copy of it. And you'll see that as soon as I do that and I save, I copied the source. You'll see that I now have 2 source lists on my portal. Don't actually want that, but it's a lot easier to just work with what's already there. We're adding another enum, so the data type is still going to be enum. The display name is going to be whatever. And as I said earlier, don't worry about the display name when you're making the property. Make it something that logically makes sense, because we can just change the display name on the fly in the portal right in this form. And so the next couple bits are the parts we just looked up. So we need a property name and we need an enum ID. And conveniently, we have already retrieved those through PowerShell. So if I take the property name and make it Demo Webinar 01, and I take the ID and I make it that, save it, and refresh, you'll see that I have this whatever list, and there are no values in there. So one quick note on that is I'm going to restart the cache builder, and I'm going to recycle my app pool. So one quick note on that, there's this handy knowledge article in our knowledge base. Well, there's two of them. I meant to grab this one. So the cache builder doesn't update everything every second. So there are certain routines it goes through, and it updates certain items every so often. And enumerations are one of those items that aren't going to change very often realistically in an environment. And obviously when you're setting it up, they're going to change a lot. But enumerations will update through the cache builder on startup and every 24 hours. So you can either be patient and wait for your cache builder to go through a full cycle since it was last restarted, or just restart it right then and there. Also, a website restart is required to pick up changes because they are cached when the website starts. So just to speed this along, I've gone and I've done those two bits. But in your environment, if you're adding something to production for whatever reason on the fly, you can just wait and they'll show up within the 24-hour window. Or you can just get them done by restarting and recycling. So you see now that my new list has those list values 1 and 2, which we added from we added in the console earlier, and I can now use those values, and there they are. So one thing I also like to check here to make sure, remember we are mapping a list together with a property. We did that originally. We created our property, we created a list. And so those are also kind of tied together here. We have our property name and we have our list ID. You want to just make sure. So I have incident IR4061 open. And I just want to open it up in the console and look at that extensions tab we were looking at earlier and see that, oh, list value 1 is set. All right, let's change it to list value 2. Let's refresh the page, and it's changed the list value 2 here. So we clearly got it right because it's talking through both kind of methods, the portal and the console. We could also look it up in PowerShell, same way we did earlier, and check the property name internally. Or if you're a SQL guru, go that route. But recapping that section, you want to make sure you're making a copy of that form into your custom space directory. If you already have a custom form, make a backup and then edit it. Don't edit that file directly in the templates directory. Again, it's a support nightmare if there's a problem, and then it will get wiped on portal upgrades. So don't try to do everything within custom space. Edit the file using something like Notepad++. Formatting, it's very important to format this kind of stuff. It's a lot easier to read and troubleshoot when you have issues. We added the new element in our form by using the property name and the ID from part 3. Other quick note here is you want to make sure, I said a couple times now, you can miss a comma, you can miss a bracket. Any of these rows do need to be comma separated. If you miss a comma, your portal page won't load. So beware. It'll also throw an error. If you hit F12 in your web browser's console, you can see throwing an error, and that's simple as a missed comma. this formatting can be very picky there, so make sure you're careful. I also dragged out another article a moment ago called How to Create Custom Forms for the Cireson Portal. So this last bit here, we did it kind of quick. Only have an hour to cover all this, but all of those other data types, certain other properties, like how many columns should the property span, all of your other options as far as how to customize that portal are all in this convenient article here. So feel free to check it out. There are some examples as well of how to add some new values, etc. So do check this out, Article 51 on our knowledge base. But that is about all I have for you today. So are there any questions? Feel free to type them in chat or elsewhere. The recording will be available. It'll be on our Vimeo site shortly after this presentation. So there's a question about, are there any supported methods for overriding the built-in tasks in the portal? Bit off topic to this, but essentially there are a few tricks you can do with a few of these, but more times than not, if you need a custom version of these tasks, it's a matter of hiding the out-of-box and creating a custom version of it. Feel free to reach out to support, to consulting services, and we can figure out what you need, and chances are we've done something similar and we can help you out. Any other? Sorry. Okay. Great. Additional resources for how to do this kind of stuff, for customizing forms. So there are some knowledge articles, like I mentioned. There's this knowledge article. There are a few knowledge articles about custom tasks. If you just search our knowledge base for custom, there's something about custom relationship types, which is a little bit more advanced than what we're doing today. But the article I just mentioned, as well as custom pages, custom form tasks, custom support group enumerations, etc. So there's lots of articles out there. Check out our webinars as well. And if you have any specific questions, you can certainly send them our way. And also feel free to, adding to that, feel free to ask your question right in the knowledge base. We have a section here towards the bottom with comments. Feel free to ask questions there, and we can certainly. The only way we're going to get better, and our only way these articles are going to get better, is if you ask the right questions, and we're refining them and certainly answering everything you need in there. So, as fields stored in the data warehouse, just reporting. Great question. So that is part of the reason why that management pack is sealed. The data warehouse only. I don't want to get too crazy in the data warehouse, but the data warehouse only will sync management packs that are sealed. So if you go into data warehouse jobs and MP sync, the MP sync job, you can see that management pack, that sealed management pack we created, will be associated and brought into our data warehouse. Now what that means is that management pack is available in the DW Data Mart database. So things like SSRS, if you use Power BI and you report against that table, you can absolutely see that column and its values. One thing that doesn't happen is it won't get processed in the cubes. There are some custom bits you have to do in the management pack to get list values into cubes. We have some examples out there. We have a community services has a support group extension out there for manual activity and change request, and in there's a couple versions of it. The initial version just pretty vanilla, kind of what we did here. There's a second version of it that does that cube logic for you, so you could take that as an example. And there's lots of other examples out there as well. Nothing there is really specific to Cireson, so there's plenty of Service Manager examples out there. Okay. Are there any other questions before we wrap up here? Alrighty. Well, as I said, the recording will be available shortly after. I also have the PowerShell snippets we used that we can get out there if anyone wants them. And other than that, have a splendid day. Thanks for joining me today, and hope you learned something. I'll see y'all later.